to Germany and has flown back to his home country, only to face 30 days in imprisonment. Now, I don't know how many of you know about Alexey Navalny, and I didn't know as much as my guest today, which is the famous journalist John Sweeney. John is the only person I think I know whose doorstep both Donald Trump, and got Donald Trump to walk out, and President Vladimir Putin. So two presidents, one soon to leave, with a rather checkered history and alliance, might say, have been in John's sights. Hello, John. Thanks for coming in.
Hiya.
So, can you explain to me and the audience, basically, you've met him several times, who is Alexey Navalny and what is the significance of this flight back to Russia?
So it's a terrifying, deadly poker game the two of them are playing, Vladimir Putin and Alexey Navalny. And some people have been saying on Twitter, it's crazy for Navalny, who survived an assassination attempt by the FSB, which is the new name for the KGB, last summer. They Novichoked him, they put it on his underpants in a hotel when he was out at the hotel. The poison bit when he was flying. The pilot saved his life by landing. There was some faff going on at the airport, you can't land, the pilot landed. And the emergency people jabbed him very, very quickly with the right stuff, and he survived. Then there's a big investigation by Bellingcat, brilliant piece of investigative journalism, and he puts up the story on YouTube. It's in English, everybody can watch it, and it shows the fact that the FSB hoods had been trailing him for 3 years, so that they had been after him for a long, long time, and this was essentially the culmination of a long, long planned attempt at assassination. So you might ask, what on earth are you doing, Alexey Navalny, going back to Russia? You know, you're going into the lion's den. He's putting his head in the lion's mouth. That's one way of looking at it. I think that people who think that haven't been watching properly.
Right.
Because this is a battle between the challenger, Alexey Navalny, and the poisoned toad that's sitting in the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin. And everybody who challenges Vladimir Putin knows that they may die. Those are the rules. So I understand what Navalny is doing by going back. He knows even if he's living in asylum in Germany, his life isn't worth an insurance policy. And he's going there deliberately. His timing is pitch perfect. So the Kremlin's bitch Donald Trump, can I call him that? I think I can.
Thanks, your matter of opinion, honestly held opinion, obviously.
The Kremlin's bitch Donald Trump, it's my honestly held opinion, is leaving. Joe Biden is coming in. He's in no mood to play nice with Putin, given his interference with American democracy. And the talking point of the civilized world right now is, what is Russia doing locking up this man they tried to poison? So I'd be very surprised if Joe doesn't refer to Alexey Navalny in his inauguration speech. And it's smart of Navalny to put it right up there.
Yeah.
And he's playing a game with the poison toad, as I like to call Vladimir Putin. That's an honestly held opinion too. What's going on here is that, and it's a weird thing, on the face of it, if it's a poker game, to switch analogies, Putin's holding all the cards. He's got control of the machinery of death, the FSB, the KGB. He runs this great corruption engine, also known as the Russian economy. He's got all of the oligarchs in Russia and abroad. They all do their master's bidding. So there's the power of life and death, there's money, and his oligarchs, they're all on his side, and Alexey Navalny is locked up in prison yet again. However, there's a kind of weird, kind of late Nelson Mandela thing about this, that the prisoner is actually the one the regime is afraid of.
And he holds them prisoner in a way.
Yeah, and so there's a kind of weird thing going on, and Alexey Navalny has done something else. He's poisoning Putin's well by telling the truth about Putin's rotten, corrupt regime to the Russian people. And so the last, the video about him being poisoned, the evidence, very strong, compelling, damning evidence that the KGB, FSB were after him for 3 years. That's got 20 million views.
This, just to explain to people, he posed as a senior FSB officer and rang one of the assassins, or attempted assassins, exposed by Bellingcat, and say, what went on? And this guy explained they put it in his underpants.
And it's kind of Marx Brothers funny. I mean, it's as if it's so the goon says, you know, well, boss, it was a real disaster, and gave new details that they didn't know.
Right.
It was a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. And the problem is, for Putin, this is not just one, it's one of a series. Now, I did a film when I was at the BBC for Newsnight in 2016. It was the first time I engaged with Navalny. And this was about the then Russian Prosecutor General, a guy called Chaika. Chaika in Russian means seagull. By the way, I did Russian O-level. I've forgotten it all, and my Russian's rubbish. Ya glupy gnom. I've just said I'm a stupid dwarf. That's how bad my Russian is.
So you're in your own honest opinion, Putin's a poison dwarf and you're a stupid dwarf. So it's quite balanced on
He's a poison toad.
A poison toad.
Okay. So this is an incredibly brave film, when she accuses the Prosecutor General and his family, his sons, of getting rid of a man who was a victim of crime and essentially benefiting from his death and taking money from it. It was now all concerned deny any wrongdoing, obviously. Nevertheless, it was an extraordinarily brave piece of journalism. So Navalny has been dicing with death for a long, long time.
Can we just go back a bit, just to two things? One is he was sort of a triumvirate. There were several opposition leaders, and if I know some people have doubts about, especially on Byline Times, our coverage of Russian intervention. We're talking about the Kremlin and Putin. It's not Russophobic. But maybe you could outline just how lethal this regime is if you're opposition leader or investigative journalist. And maybe you'll explain that Novichok was the same chemical. It's a very rare nerve agent, I believe, manufactured in a Russian facility, which was used on the streets of Salisbury, which killed the British citizen and almost killed a Russian dissident. Isn't that right?
Yeah. So the same poison that killed Dawn Sturgis, this poor woman from Wiltshire, is the thing that they used against Navalny. Putin's got a history for this. There's a lot of, well, there are a number of people who were difficult for Putin, who died in mysterious circumstances. There's a guy called Yuri Shakachikin, who was a good Russian MP who investigated the Moscow apartment bombs in '99, and there is strong evidence, I would call it damning, that this was a black operation by the FSB/KGB to blow up ordinary Russians sitting in their homes in Moscow apartments and blame it on the Chechens.
In order to start a war.
To start a war, which the Russian state then won, and that propelled Putin into the Kremlin. So his regime is darkened with blood from the get-go. By the way, there were only, I went to Chechnya undercover twice. I went to the town where there was evidence of a third bomb, which didn't go off, which the locals uncovered, pointing to the FSB, KGB. I then went undercover to Chechnya twice in 2000 to report Putin's war crimes against the Chechens. And there were two people in Britain who led the campaign, to which I was very grateful at the time. One of them was Vanessa Redgrave, the other was Jeremy Corbyn. What was weird was, I'm ignoring the police siren as it's about to come to arrest me.
Outside there's probably an ambulance.
That's true. And whoever that is, fingers crossed you're going to be okay. So Corbyn was very good back then in 2000 calling Tony Blair's government to account for being too close to Putin, which I find very weird. What happened after the Salisbury poisonings, he kind of gave the Russians the benefit of the doubt, or rather, there was no kind of, he gave the Russians the benefit of the doubt in an extraordinary way.
Well, he queried the evidence. This was clearly
he queried the evidence in a way which was foolish, bearing in mind the back history. So there were three Russians, they weren't politicians, well actually there were three Russians who challenged Putin, who I met, all of whom warned me about Putin when it was unfashionable in the West to be so wary of Putin. And they were Anna Politkovskaya, a great and brave journalist who went to Chechnya a lot, her lovely colleague Natasha Estemirova, who went to Chechnya a lot, and Boris Nemtsov, who was both a journalist and a very brilliant and charismatic politician, who was a lovely and funny man. Putin's cronies built a fancy road from for the Russian Olympics from the beach to the Sochi ski resort. It cost $5 billion. And Boris Nemtsov said, when I interviewed him, it would have been cheaper to have lined this road with Louis Vuitton handbags. It was really funny. And what happened to them? Anna Politkovskaya shot. Natasha Estemirova shot. Boris Nemtsov shot. So when Alexey Navalny challenges the Kremlin, he knows that history. He was big friends with Nemtsov. They were friends. By the way, there's something a bit dark in Nemtsov's history which we should look at. In 2009, he moved to the nationalist right.
You mean Navalny, not Nemtsov?
Sorry, I apologise.
Yeah.
So there's something dark about Navalny's history that we should look at. That in 2009, he allied himself with the far right, the xenophobic right, and said some sort of slightly ugly things about minorities in Russia, mainly Muslim people coming from the south, da-da-da-da-da. Then what happened was he became popular in his own right and was locked up, and getting locked up was the making of him, because inside the prison with him were the other people from the liberal opposition, and he got to know them, he got to trust them, he got to like them. After all, they'd all been locked up by Putin, and he learnt their arguments and beliefs and came out of prison a changed politician. He dumped the far right stuff, or the nationalist stuff. I don't think he'd ever accepted he was far right, but he dumped the nationalist rhetoric and has never used it since.
And he's quite open about things like when Russia there's a lot of homophobia,
yes,
state laws
he's
about...
the only politician in Russia of any substance who believes in same-sex marriage, same-sex relationships. His family is half Ukrainian, I think, half Russian, and he is very much against Putin's war in Ukraine. Now, these are daringly liberal positions to hold in Putin's Russia, so that the idea that he's some kind of right-wing, far right-wing monster is foolish, in my view, and there was a moment, but he's put it behind him. What he's repeatedly done since then is to be very, very collegiate. He has got together an opposition and has said, if you want to vote out Putin's party, the party of thieves and crooks he calls them, you will vote for whoever they are. They could be communists, they can be on the right, they can be liberal. It's whoever's going to beat the corrupt party in power that wins. So he is a brave politician, and he is the effective leader of the opposition in Russia, and there's no one else.
So just to look ahead and look at that pivotal moment, Ukraine seems to me, with various Russian oligarchs based here, and obviously if we look at the role in the alleged interference or proven interference in the American elections and the role of Paul Manafort, who was the campaign manager for the Party of Regions, Yanukovych, the dictator in power in Ukraine. That seems to be a pivotal moment in terms of allegiance to Putin. Now, you're saying that both Nemtsov, he was killed, wasn't he, around the point he was releasing this report of the casualties among Russians who weren't supposed to be fighting in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass, because they weren't supposed to be intervening. That was obviously crucial to Putin. To what extent is Ukraine going to figure in this? Because just to explain to the audience who see how this could connect to the election of Joe Biden, the big scandal around Joe Biden has this allegations of his son. This is set up in Ukraine with pro-Russian MPs talking about Hunter Biden doing a deal. Rudy Giuliani tried to sell this story. It never got any traction, this laptop. But people don't seem to realize that Joe Biden was Obama's emissary in Kiev, in Ukraine, during the Maidan Revolution, the Revolution Spirit or whatever. And so Joe Biden knows the scene, doesn't he? He knows what Navalny is walking into. He knows the connections with Putin and the oligarchs and the role of Ukraine in this whole story.
It's the first time since 2016 that I will, worrying about Russia, will sleep much more safely in my bed, because Joe Biden knows the story. The story is that Putin is a neo-fascist authoritarian leader who murders his political opponents, who rigs elections, who poisons his enemies, who poisons anyone who used to be in the KGB or the GRU, military intelligence, as happens as they tried to do Skripal, who is responsible for the shooting down of MH17. Now, Trump didn't give a damn about that. Trump has got his own stuff to hide. One suspects compromat, one suspects that the reports of him shagging around in Moscow are wholly on the money, and therefore that Trump was somehow Putin's bitch. Joe Biden isn't. Joe Biden knows what's happened in Ukraine in 2014. This was an effective soft invasion, a masked invasion, but nevertheless an invasion. That's what it was. And Biden is going to call it out. And he's going to call it out because of the pro-Trump interference in American democracy by Vladimir Putin. So Navalny has read the situation.
I was going to say, is this the
and
timing?
He's timed. I'm like, the question is, why now? Well, this is a bloody good day, because on Wednesday, Joe Biden has his inauguration speech, and he's going to give it to Vladimir Putin. I suspect, I may be wrong here, Peter, but this is my prediction. He's going to give it to Putin with both barrels, and he's going to say, let Navalny out.
And what can he do short of unlikely military intervention?
Well, I am sick to death, as somebody who cares about democracy in Britain, in Europe, in the United States, around the world, by us slapping Vladimir Putin on the wrist. So he can do a number of things, but you know, if you want to hurt Putin, you send a clear message to the oligarchs that actually it may no longer be in their final interest to be slavishly loyal to Putin. They might start thinking that actually that their hold on their wealth, their obscene wealth, is endangered by slavish loyalty to Putin.
Except their health. I mean, there have been, BuzzFeed documented 9, let's just say, suspicious deaths in the UK, people falling out of windows.
So yeah, I mean, like, if you tangle with Putin, you may die, but at the same, which means that to put pressure on the Kremlin, you can't muck about. So a thing they could do, that Joe could do, is to cut the ruble's convertibility to the dollar. Now that's a big thing to do, but at the moment, America, the West, does not need Russian oil and gas.
Yeah.
Because we're not flying, we're barely driving, we're where we all, you know, and Joe's going to put money in the electric cars in the States. That means here too as well. All sorts of interesting things are going to happen. For example, the CIA has been on the naughty step for the last 4 years. It's essentially been switched off, and it's now about to be switched on again. And those people leak. They're not like MI6 tells you, MI5, they tell you fuck all. CIA leak, and you know, what have they got? Do they know stuff about senior players in Britain? I mean, can we name them? Let's name them. Nigel Farage.
Well,
Aaron Banks. Wait for it. They deny any wrongdoing, and obviously they do. But the question is, has there been Russian interference, witting and unwitting, maybe they didn't know, but was there Russian interference in the British Brexit referendum? Now, the problem has been that our security people, MI6, have not looked at this properly because they were not tasked to do so by, for example, the Foreign Secretary, who was Boris Johnson, who may have had money in that game, or at least that he was a beneficiary politically from Brexit. So what happens now is that suddenly Joe Biden's in power in Washington, and he would like to know the answer to these questions that we all have been asking. So that's interesting. And that also fuels Navalny. So the game is changing. For the moment, the challenger is in the cooler, the poison toad is in the Kremlin, and you'd think that everything's with the toad. Now, the odds are against him. The odds are against the challenger, but my money is on Navalny, not the toad.
Well, you betted successfully on behalf of your yet-to-be-born grandchild, I believe, on Joe Biden winning. So your tips in this regard are quite good. I mean, looking so far. We talked about the CIA. You talk about Biden we have the Mueller report, which hasn't been unredacted, and other investigations. What would you say to people who say, well, why are you, a journalist, a British investigative journalist, suddenly taking the side of the deep state? Isn't America just as bad? Why do you pick on Russia? Are you not just being Russophobic? I mean, what is that against Putin?
Well, that's complete bollocks. I love Russia. I wish I spoke Russian properly. It's a beautiful language. I love Russian literature. One of my favourite books is A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Solzhenitsyn. I love the detective novels of Boris Yakunin. I'm reading Andrew McKean's, one of Andrew McKean's novels right now.
So you love the culture?
I love the culture, I love the language, I love the people, I love the alcohol. I love everything about Russia. I love blini and caviar. I love Russia to bits. I don't like fascism or neo-fascists like Vladimir Putin. It's a simple distinction, and it's one the West has been blinded to because of Russian money. Now, looking ahead, looking down the track, oil and gas are becoming less and less popular by the day. They're ruining the planet. They're destroying future generations because of global warming and all of that.
And they're the main, just explain, that's the main resources. Russia doesn't have a productive service economy, but it has great reserves of oil and gas.
It has a massive amount of oil and gas, but we don't need that anything like as much as we used to, and that's a good thing. So there's pressure then on the Kremlin. There's pressure internally from Navalny. The West so far has been weak in applying the level of pressure to get important and powerful people in Russia to try and move Putin out from his lock on power. But it's a fascinating moment in history. Now, I'm worried for a number of people who spend quite a lot of time in London, and I'm very worried about them. I'm talking about people like Roman Abramovich, the billionaire who owns Chelsea, Alisher Usmanov, who he sold it now, but he had a share in Arsenal, very rich man, a big player in London still, and of course the Lebedevs, father and son, Yevgeny and his father, Alexander Lebedev, who was, if you remember, the KGB resident in London, resident with a Z, i.e. the senior KGB officer in London from, I think it was 1988 to 1992.
Who then became a successful banker, is that right?
He became a banker, and
then took over ownership of the Independent and the Evening Standard.
Indeed, and the Lebedev's father and son still run that, and Boris just the other day made Yevgeny Lebedev a lord.
Yeah.
What's striking about these three is they have said not a word about Navalny's poisoning or his imprisonment.
So are they in an awkward position, would you say?
All concerned deny any wrongdoing, but yes, they are in an awkward position. Let's have a look at Yevgeny Lebedev. Now, he's a member of the House of Lords. And as a British lawmaker, you would expect, and also as somebody, his official title is, he's Lord Lebedev of blah, blah, you know, Upper Sodbury somewhere, and Siberia. Now, there's a clue, folks, right there, okay?
Did he not have to get permission from the Russian
He did.
president?
He actually had to get permission from the Kremlin to say, or, you know, can we borrow the name, you know, not some English hamlet, but Siberia.
A big place.
Okay, so that's terrific. But actually what's not terrific is that, is it possible that the Kremlin have got a hold over this British lawmaker? A Russian, a fellow Russian, because he was born Russian, has been poisoned and he's gone back to Russia and he's been locked up. What is your view, Lord Lebedev, Yevgeny Lebedev, about this? Do you think in locking up Alexey Navalny, the Kremlin have behaved disgracefully? Yes or no? And the answer is complete fucking silence.
Well, hopefully he's a member of the House of Lords. He could be challenged there, and I'm sure he would say he would not support any acts of violence by the Russian state. But we can know more about this, can't we? Just closing this debate, because I believe you're working on a film on this.
I am working on a
Byline
film
TV.
called The Perugia Candidate, and we're going to make it for Byline TV.
When the lockdown ends and we can travel to Perugia.
When the lockdown ends. And after the film, I'm working on becoming a member of the House of Lords.
Right.
Because if no one else will ask Lord Lebedev about this, then Lord Sweeney will be. It's a
Lord-
work in progress. I'm talking to Boris Johnson and the Queen about it right now.
Well, Lord Sweeney of what? Of what will you be, apart from the betting shop? I've never heard
I
of
think
them. Where were you brought up? Remind me.
I was brought up in
Hampshire? No.
I was brought up in Altrincham in Cheshire, and then we moved to Hampshire. I'd kind of like to be Lord Sweeney of the Dog and Duck.
Well, Lord Sweeney of the Dog and Duck to be, thanks for coming in and explaining so brilliantly about the background of Alexey Navalny and these potentially world-shattering events that could be taking place in the next week or so with Biden's inauguration. You'll be writing for us a piece on Byline Times to this effect, coming out hopefully tomorrow, that's right, and look forward to having you back here soon.
Thank you very much, and one more thing, all concerned deny any wrongdoing.
They certainly do.